Do you live, work or study in any of India's top cities? Have you struggled with parking your vehicle? Perhaps had an argument over parking or circled around markets or offices or even your own home to find a safe spot to park your bike or car in? I'm sure the answer is an overwhelming yes. This is why India's vehicle count surpassed 300 million or 30 crore in 2023, which is a 10% annual growth. In Mumbai, nearly 700 new vehicles, including all categories, were registered daily at the city RTOs in 2022-23. Come to Delhi. Last year, the city set a new record with 1,800 vehicles sold each day, totaling 6.5 lakh new vehicles sold in a single year. Bengaluru, known for its nightmare traffic, crossed 1 crore private vehicles on its road in 2023. Now, India's mega cities like Mumbai have a density of over 2,000 vehicles per kilometer of road. Now, 2,000 vehicles on 1 kilometer of road. It's a staggering count. But again, we don't need statistics to wake up to this growing urban reality. We face parking issues on a daily basis. How do we solve for it? Let's get some sharp answers. We have Shreya Gadepalli, founder, Urban Work Institute, Rajesh Kabra, managing director, RR Parkon, and Avikshit Moral, partner, Indus Law, with us. Thank you so much for joining me, Shreya. As you have the policy think tank hat on you, let me start with you. You know, on the one hand, we say and make this statement that most of our cities lack any comprehensive parking management systems, but then we start digging, we find that in 2023, Ahmedabad Municipal Corporation introduced a revised parking policy. Mumbai proposed a parking policy in 2022. Bengaluru's parking policy 2.0 was announced again in December 2020. I can go on. Delhi has notified a Delhi Maintenance and Management of Parking Rules. Pune has one, which was released in 2016, and these are second, third versions, in fact, if not more. But the ground situation isn't getting better. Why?
So I think the answer is pretty simple, that somehow, some of these parking policies, as you know, are somewhat progressive. And when I say progressive, I mean they're thinking about, rather than accommodating unabated amount of parking, they're talking about how to control parking. And the principal point is that we cannot accommodate the amount of parking demand that there is on our roads. So the parking needs to shift to off-street spaces. Now, the question is, who's going to build these off-street spaces? Now, oftentimes it's assumed that the government is going to build these. But parking is a piece of real estate, right? It needs land, it needs a building, it needs operations. And if you start calculating the amount turns out to be for each parking slot, which is 300 square feet of real estate, something of the order of 20,000 rupees per month. That's for an average Indian city. For mega cities, that number's upwards of 50,000 rupees per month. Now, the question is, who's willing to pay 50,000 rupees a month for parking their vehicle? I think that's where the point is, where, while it's acknowledged that we cannot accommodate parking on our roads, if that parking needs to move to off-street structures, it has a cost involved. And the government has no business in trying to build this parking. Because imagine if a person buys an AC and asks the government to give a room to fit the AC in, it sounds bizarre. But that's exactly what we often expect from the government. We buy a car and we say the government needs to provide us with parking. It's no different. So parking is not a right, but it's a private need that needs to be met privately. And unless the government starts managing parking space on roads, so it controls parking space on roads and also prices it at a premium price, the private parking market is not going to take off. So I think that's where we are stuck. So
wow, you've opened a Pandora's box right at the top of the show, saying that you wouldn't ask the government to fit your AC. So if you're buying a vehicle, then obviously you have to figure out with the private provider on where will the parking come from. Rajesh, you have studied this problem deeply. Your company, RR Parkon, has been providing semi-automatic and fully automatic parking solutions for the last 2 decades. Would you agree with Shreya? I mean, then it becomes a hugely complicated problem to solve. Who in the private world will put that much money just to provide parking, considering there are roads all around, streets, parks to park vehicles around.
What we could do is we could do a private-public partnership. So one possible idea, like in a city like Bombay, I'm sure the BMC has small plots of land which are as small as 500 square meters. One could build about 100-car park facility over there, and we could sort of like how you have multiple schemes in the BMC with respect to SRA. Similarly, if like a parking scheme comes over where the developers asked to build this, so the government provides the land, the developer provides the multi-level car parking facility of sorts, and gets an extra FSI in return. Then a solution like that, I think, will be more scalable and workable.
Absolutely. I mean, you just ask the private sector to do it, it's not going to happen. I mean, we are a country jostling for land, but it is a perfect solution if you look at it. All right, Avikshit, talking about developers. So one is, of course, they come together with the local urban development body, whether it's an MCD or a BBMP, and then say, okay, fine, give us the land because land is most expensive, and then we will build vertical parking, multi-level parking. But even before that, the larger question is that even the residential projects and commercial projects and office projects which are being built today don't have adequate parking. So much so that from a city like Pune, we had buyers complaining, saying that the developer has not allotted the size of the parking promise. So there are several layers to this problem, isn't it?
Look at the development control regulation right now that we have. It's strange that in a city like Mumbai, there are certain guidelines basis which a developer is supposed to provide area as far as parking is concerned. So I may be slightly off on the number, but I understand that 950 square foot is the bare minimum for which you have to give one full parking. Okay, so it's a variation between like 650 to 950. So anybody who understands this city today, a 950 in Bombay is almost like a 3 BHK. And most of these families actually today have 2 or 3 vehicles. So where is the spillover? The spillover is because I don't have a space in my building, I'm parking on the road. Plus, you are competing also with the commercial guys. Let's say the Uber guys. Where do they park? They park outside our building. Now, MCGM also has a policy which gives a right of first refusal to the building guys. I mean, whose building it is, it's already there. But who's enforcing it? Nobody. I mean, if you remember, there was a very famous incident in Dadar where, they came up with these notifications that you no longer can park here and the entire residence went up in arm, So there is an issue, I feel, first on the policy level. I mean, we have to be forward thinking. I mean, 900 square foot, if we feel that family is entitled to one parking, it really doesn't work. Secondly, let me give you a simple example. I will just take a minute. Look at SRA. SRA is one of the key providers of housing in India today. I mean, in Mumbai at least, slum rehabilitation. The policies are such that a slum guy who gets a rehabilitated unit, there's no requirement of giving him parking. So what does he do? He parks on the road.
Wow.
So this is the kind of mismatch which is actually leading to the parking spaces getting full on the road. And I mean, I'm just kind of then adding up and the policymakers and then thinking, how do I kind of get around it? I mean, where do you even get new parking spaces?
I mean, this is a serious mess. Shreya, you're turning around and saying that it should be, private parties. It's not something that the government should be providing. And as soon as you make it that, then clearly that will discourage car ownership. But then that's a separate question. I'll come to it a little bit later. But what seems to me is that there is a huge disconnect in the way our cities are getting built, the kind of parking that those who are building need to provide. It's totally out of sync with the reality of, you may buy a 4 crore home, but all that you get is one parking, and those people are buying 2 to 3 cars. How do you move the cheese on something like this? It's not easy. I mean, what do you do?
The suggestion is somehow that this 3-bedroom house now needs to have a 3-car parking space as well. Now, how much does a car parking require? So you require 300 square feet per car if you create structured parking. So within that same building, if you're trying to create parking, 300 square feet. So for 3 cars, you will require 900 square feet of additional real estate that's attached or bundled with a 900 square feet apartment. Now, somebody needs to foot the bill for building this 900 square feet. Who's going to build it, right? Should the government be building it? The question is, why should the government be building something the same size as the same apartment that is being built? I will also ask something else.
Go ahead.
Like, look at the number of people who are either homeless or living in slums in a city like Mumbai. You know, that numbers, like depending upon which figure that you look, anywhere between a third to half of Mumbai actually lives in slums or substandard housing. Should the government be building housing for people, or should it be building housing for cars? That's really the question. Because
so Shreya, let me ask you, what happens? I mean, globally, the governments do provide for parking spots, right? And parking spaces.
They don't.
You're saying
so
that...
I think that's actually a mistake. Or
not even land?
Disbelief.
Not even land?
No. So most
in
cities,
a Singapore model, the land is also not provided by the government. Everything is...
So it's very interesting that you bring about Singapore. So because Singapore's development control regulations say that while there is a minimum requirement for parking, so if you are getting an apartment, the builder has to build a certain amount of parking. Do also keep in mind that most of the housing in Singapore is the housing board that is building the housing. But Singapore also says that any additional parking is going to be taken from your FSI. So which means that you have the option of either getting an additional bedroom or getting an additional parking unit. Your choice. So if you want to have one less bedroom and one more parking, go ahead. Or if you want one more bedroom and one less parking, that's your choice.
So are you saying LA, Zurich, all of these cities which do have parking issues but are managing it quite well, everywhere parking is managed completely by private sector operators, including buying the land?
What the government has done, so many European cities actually initially made the mistake in the 1960s and 70s of starting to build parking on their own. They realized their mistake and then started going back. You cannot build more than one for 10 apartments.
Okay.
Because we are providing good public transport. So the job of the government is to build
Zurich
better
is different. We don't have public transport. That's the unfortunate part, which is also encouraging people.
We need to build that.
We need to build that.
It's cheaper to build public transport than to be building parking. That's the principal point to be made.
Fantastic. And it's a fantastic point. It's just that, you know, public transport in India is always lagging and we have a problem to solve for now. I think we're going to get there someday, looking at the need being recognized. But Rajesh, I'm going to come back to you and say, even the existing parking and how they're managed. For example, I mean, all of you are talking about Mumbai. I live in Delhi. I'm going to give you a very easy example. There is a Hoskas market. There has been a multi-level parking provided by the municipal corporation. Nobody goes inside and parks. Everyone still encroaches roads. Everyone still encroaches the, you know, where homes are, gullies, making them congested. So my question is that we absolutely do not have any disincentive at all for illegal parking. Have you looked at that, Rajesh?
I think that infrastructure needs to be supported with, strong regulation. So where the government is providing parking, you need to have, let's say, harsher, penalties or harsher rates, to disincentivize people to park in the streets and park more on in these facilities, especially because the government is providing at a highly subsidized rate. The government does not recover its investments from the parking fee alone. They recover it rather from advertising and peripheral sort of revenues that the government gets with it. So I think you need to have, like near a parking facility, for example, have a 500 meter or a kilometer radius where, one has no parking zones or... Yeah,
you need to have that. I mean, there's no demarcation. There is absolutely zero penalty. There's zero enforcement. Avikshit, it becomes a political issue. I mean, if you tell any RWA or any society, takes umbrage to the fact that there's a commercial sector which has come up and people are parking, even the local councillors are unable to get it enforced by the lawmakers or lawkeepers like our police. They are stretched.
Manisha, most of this issue is because of an enforcement problem. I mean, you may have designated areas which are specific. Let's say even outside the High Court, if you say that this area cannot be used for parking, you will still find vehicles there parked. It's purely an enforcement issue. I mean, one is that, and secondly, I mean, we can pass this on to private players to at least manage the parking. I mean, I don't understand why that can be done. Some of the cities that we were comparing right now, we have to remember that they have a bid process and you have to give your proof of parking before you buy a vehicle. Which is not the case in Bombay. You buy 18 vehicles, nobody cares. Okay. Next is, who foots the bill? I'll ask you a simple question. Who foots the bill to rehab the people who are living in old buildings? The builder. Why? Because he's given incentive by way of FSI. You open up the FSI for somebody who's willing to give you extra parking, and you tell him for every parking that you give, I'll give you some FSI in form of something. Do you think he'll not be able to do it? I'm sure he'll be able to do it.
Okay.
I mean, it's just a policy issue.
So we are coming to some solutions. Stay with us. We're going to take a quick break, but this time I want solutions. So we've outlined the problem and very, very diverse views and very interesting views. I've learned so much. Come back to see what is feasible and what can be implemented in India, because we are not going to reach an utopian position overnight. Parking mess in Indian cities, how serious is it and how do we solve for it? That's what we are discussing on the Urban Agenda today. Bottom line, the number of vehicles on Indian roads are increasing rapidly, and despite congestion concerns, the automobile sector remains crucial for the economy. It adds to GDP, it creates jobs, motor vehicles, taxes are an important revenue sources for the states. It's obvious why there's no inclination at any level of government to cap the vehicle numbers in cities, which means we simply have to prioritize parking, planning, infrastructure, and have a better way to arrive at some solutions. Rajesh, I'm going to come to you. That is the bottom line. You know, we might say that we want more public transport. It will happen. It will take time. And nobody is going to stop number of cars being sold. We can only make it more expensive to own them and have a tag of also including or buying a parking spot. So that to me seems like a easy solution, but go ahead, give me 2 or 3 solutions you think we should start with.
So I think the first solution would definitely all municipal corporations should look at their parking norms, revisit their parking norms, because they aren't adequate, like one of the fellow panelists mentioned. Similarly, in commercial real estate, I myself am struggling to find an office because there's only one parking per 1,000 or 1,500 square feet which is available. It needs to be at least one per 500 square feet for sure. Second is definitely to have more incentive programs for private players to provide more parking when they're building their own real estate projects and maybe hand over to the municipal corporations in exchange of FSI. And third, government itself will have to sort of, take the step of providing extra parking for the public.
So you're saying government role cannot right now be dismissed. Shreya, there are other ways of also doing it, like zoning, using technology for at least whatever you have, for having no parking zones, just making it so expensive to own a vehicle. That, it discourages people. Would you agree with some of those, or you have some other solutions?
I would agree with that. See, at the end of the day, unless you start managing parking on the street, we cannot make any difference. So no amount of parking in buildings is going to solve it, because despite the fact that constantly our development control regulations have been increasing the amount of parking required within buildings, yet we see the problem continues to be on the streets. And the only solution for that is we need to control the amount of parking that's allowed on streets, and we need to start charging for that parking. Start charging for parking on the roads. You can gradually ramp up this price. Start with 20 rupees today, but increase it to 30 tomorrow, 40 the year after. Yeah. Eventually to the point that it becomes a market price. And the market price right now is about 60 rupees per hour. At 60 rupees per hour, a private business can run on its own with the land and the building and the operating cost in most cities.
Really?
Operate parking. Yes.
Oh.
We've done the calculations. We've done this in multiple cities.
So you're saying privately run. Rajesh says public-private partnership. We need to provide parking. But what I'm hearing and what Avikshit is also saying is have policy changes on two fronts. One is, if you're giving people the right to build, they must also build along with it, whether it's an office or a home, adequate parking. That is something that they need to commit to. And of course, start charging for parking. Avikshit, do we need political will to do it? I mean, people are parking all over the country, but everywhere, wherever they find a spot. They don't care whether it's inconveniencing everyone. So what do we do about actually penalizing that or getting money out of that?
I think the best way is to get money. So, I mean, most of the big cities that I know, you get those permits. If you have a permit on, you can park on the road. If you don't, then you get a ticket. So
not a bad idea.
The second point that I wanted to make, which is very important, our law needs to now allow builders to sell parking. We've stopped that. Hence, there is no incentive left for a builder. Once the builder has given the minimum parking as per the statute, let's say he's required to give 40 parkings in a building, he's given that. If after that he wants to sell extra, let's say to the building members or even to adjacent guy, let him sell it. Let's build in an incentive for a builder to now start making new parkings. And we have stack, we have so many technologies, right? We have those circular parkings. So in less spaces, you can actually adjust a lot of cars. So let's open up, let the builder sell parking,
Okay.
I think that's one of the...
All right. So that's very curious to Maharashtra, right? And in every which way, now it's been clubbed that you can't sell parking separately. It has to be part of the project that you're delivering. Yes. All right. I think we've come to some good solutions today. The problem and some very unique solutions. Rajesh Kabra, Shreya Gadepalli and Avikshit Moral, thank you very much for joining me today. Well, it's not very hard to bring a method to the madness of parking in Indian cities. I think it's a question of prioritizing the issue and then finding policy changes or implementing policy changes, including enforcement and charges for parking on the streets and roads. Thanks for joining me. I'm Manisha Natarajan signing off.